Hello there, 3Ms. Welcome to the last lesson of cycle 3. Yay! Um, I'm in the basement, so you might hear weird sounds. Um, Today, we're going to learn about something that's called the discriminant. And this is something that is super helpful to figure out how many solutions a quadratic equation has. So, your learning goal for this lesson is to be able to use the discriminant to determine the number of zeros, which are also known as x-intercepts, roots, solutions of a quadratic equation that's in standard form. If an equation is not in standard form, you need to rearrange it so that it is, and I'll do an example with that. Okay, so the discriminant is part of the quadratic formula. So in the quadratic formula, the part that's under the square root is called the discriminant, and it tells us how many zeros there are. And remember, zeros are also called x-intercepts, they're called roots, and they're called solutions. So if I use any of those terms, it means the same thing. It's where the parabola goes through the x-axis, okay? So this part underneath the root is called the discriminant. So the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. And depending on if this is positive, negative, or 0, it tells us how many x-intercepts there are. Please know that it's only the part under the root. It does not include doing the root. So it's just b squared minus 4ac. And I'm going to do a few examples. But first, just to summarize for you, so the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. If it's positive, we have two zeros, or two real roots is what we call them. Um, so a parabola would be upward for facing or downward facing and going through the x-axis twice. If the discriminant is 0, it has one root, which comes out twice. That's why it's said one repeated root. Well, what that just means is that it just touches the x-axis once on the vertex. If the discriminant is negative, there's no real roots. If you go higher in math, you'll talk about imaginary numbers. We are not getting into that now. That's when you take a square root of a negative number. Um, all you need to know here is if the discriminant is negative, it does not go through the axis. So it's either floating above it or floating below it and pointing down. Okay, so let's do some examples. So how many roots does this quadratic equation have? Well, we got 3x squared plus 4x plus 5. So the first thing I like to do is label my numbers and what letters they are. So remember, the number in front of the x squared term is a, so a is 3. The number in front of the x term is 4, and the number by itself is 5, and that's c. So now we know what our a is, our b, and our c. Okay, so if we look at our discriminant then, our discriminant is b squared minus 4 times a times c. And now what we do next is we put our numbers in for the letters. So our b is 4, our a is 3, and our c is 5. So this becomes 4 squared minus 4 times 3 times 5. Then you're going to do the math. I like doing the first term first. So 4 squared is 16. And then I like doing the second term on its own. So negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. And negative 12 times 5 is negative 60. So make sure you're taking this sign when you multiply. And then the next step is to just combine these two numbers. So 16 minus 60 is negative 44. And because that's a negative number, that means there's no roots. You can absolutely check this in Desmos. So if we graph our equation is in Desmos, you'll see the parabola looks like this. And notice how it does not go through the x-axis. So that means there's no roots. There's no x-intercepts. So that's correct. Let's do another couple examples. So what about this equation? We've got negative 2x squared plus 7x plus 1 equals 0. Okay, so let's label our A, B, and C. So A is -2, B is 7, and C is 1. Let's remind ourselves what the discriminant is. Well, it's B squared minus 4 times A times C. Now we're going to substitute our numbers in for A, B, and C. That gives us 7 squared minus 4 times -2 times +1. And now we're going to do the math on both those terms. So 7 squared is 49, and -4 times -2 is +8, and +8 times 1 is +8. So we get 49 plus 8, which is 57. And so, because this is positive, there must be two roots, or two x-intercepts. So again, check it in Desmos. If you plot this equation, and yes, indeed, this parabola does go through the x-axis twice. Once here and once here. So this discriminant, it doesn't tell us what the zeros are, it's just telling us how many there are. And sometimes you just want to know how many solutions there are. And this is a quick way to check that. Okay, last one. So this one is 9x squared plus 6x plus 6 equals 5. So remember, this needs to be equals to 0 if we want to use the quadratic equation. Well, the same goes for the discriminant. So we need to rearrange this so we have 0 on this right-hand side. So I'm going to get this 5 over to this side. So I'm going to minus 5 from both sides. So my equation is 9x squared plus 6x plus 1. Now that I've rearranged that, I can label my A, B, and C. And then I can put those numbers into my discriminant. So 6 squared minus 4 times 9 times 1. 6 squared is 36. -4 times 9 is -36 times 1 is 36. So we get 36 minus 36. So that equals to 0. And if you go back to that slide with the summary, because this is 0, there must just be one root or one intercept. And let's take a look at it in Desmos. If we plot this, you do need to plot the rearranged form in Desmos. You cannot plot the original equation. But once we plot the standard form equation, you'll see that it only hits the x-axis once, and so therefore there's only one solution. Okay, that's it for the lesson, and that is it for this cycle. So there's some practice questions that I came up with. There's only 6 of them, I think. There's answers provided, and it's called 3.10, the discriminant practice on Brightspace. Once you feel comfortable with that, you can go ahead and do the quiz. And the next lesson, we'll be going into cycle 4, which are all applications of some of the things we've been doing throughout this semester. So that's it for today. As always, please let me know if you have any questions by clicking on that envelope in the top right corner of Brightspace. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.